In 1986, Cleveland tried to improve its image by releasing almost 1.5 million balloons into the sky. For about 5 minutes, it looked magical. Downtown Cleveland was suddenly wrapped in color. Balloons floated around Terminal Tower. People cheered. Cameras rolled. Somewhere, a public relations person probably whispered, "We did it." Then the balloons came back. And not in a cute, "hello again, old friend" way. More like, "We are now weather, traffic, lake pollution, airport disruption, and legal paperwork." Welcome to Balloonfest '86, the day Cleveland technically broke a world record, and then the sky filed a complaint. In the mid-1980s, Cleveland wanted good publicity. The city had been fighting a rough image for years, and civic leaders wanted something big, happy, colorful, and aggressively non-threatening. So the local United Way organized Balloonfest '86 as a charity fundraiser and world record stunt. The idea was simple: sell sponsorships, raise money, gather volunteers, release a ridiculous number of balloons, and show the world that Cleveland was back. Because nothing says urban comeback like turning the atmosphere into a party supply aisle. The event happened on September 27, 1986, at Public Square in downtown Cleveland. The goal was to beat the previous mass balloon release record, reportedly set by Disneyland the year before. The official final number, recognized in the 1988 Guinness Book of World Records, was 1,429,643 balloons. And honestly, at the planning stage, you can see why people were excited. Charity? Great. Volunteers? Great. Giant colorful visual? Great. Local news coverage? Great. The missing question was, where do 1.4 million balloons go after the photo op? And that, unfortunately, was the part of the plan that got handled with the confidence of a man putting metal in a microwave and saying, "Relax, I've seen cartoons." To pull this off, organizers built a massive enclosure in Public Square, basically a giant balloon cage, which is somehow both a real thing and the most Cleveland sentence ever written. Thousands of volunteers helped fill the balloons with helium. Contemporary accounts describe a huge, multi-story structure covered with netting, with volunteers working for hours to inflate balloon after balloon after balloon. Imagine being volunteer number 1,842. You show up thinking, "I'm helping charity today." 3 hours later, you are trapped inside a rainbow thundercloud, your hands smell like latex, and every squeak sounds like a tiny clown stepping on a duck. The scale was absurd. This was not some balloons. This was not a festive amount. This was not grandma's retirement brunch. This was a city-sized bubble bath of helium. And the expectation was simple. The balloons would rise, spread out, drift away, deflate, and eventually come down somewhere harmless. That was the theory. The problem is that nature does not read event proposals. Nature does not attend planning meetings. Nature is not impressed by clipboards. Nature looked at Balloonfest '86 and said, "Oh, you made the sky crunchy? Interesting." Then came the big moment. A crowd gathered downtown. Cameras aimed upward. The giant net opened. And suddenly, nearly 1.5 million balloons exploded into the sky. For a moment, it was genuinely beautiful. The balloons poured upward around Terminal Tower like a reverse waterfall made by a committee of kindergartners. Red, blue, yellow, green, a gigantic cloud of civic optimism floating above Cleveland. The crowd cheered. The cameras loved it. The record was broken. The whole thing looked like the ending of a movie where everyone learns community spirit. Cleveland had its image moment. And to be fair, this is why the story is so memorable. The footage is stunning. It looks impossible. It looks fake. It looks like someone gave a screensaver a municipal budget. For a few minutes, Balloonfest '86 was exactly what it promised to be: bright, joyful, ridiculous, and unforgettable. Unfortunately, it was about to become unforgettable in the other direction. Because while everyone on the ground was celebrating, the weather was quietly approaching like a substitute teacher with bad news. A storm front was moving in. Rain and cooler air changed what the balloons were expected to do. Instead of floating away and deflating gradually, many of them were pushed back down while still inflated. And that's when the sky said, "Return to sender."
Here's the core mistake. Helium balloons usually rise high enough that they expand, lose helium, burst, or deflate before coming back down. That was the hope. But weather had other plans. Rain and cool air pushed many balloons downward before they had time to deflate. So instead of becoming tiny, harmless scraps after a long journey, huge numbers came back as full or partly inflated balloons. Which is adorable when it's one balloon. Less adorable when it's a million tiny beach balls invading your infrastructure. They landed in streets. They landed on rooftops. They landed in trees. They drifted into Lake Erie. They scattered across neighborhoods. They showed up where balloons had absolutely no business being. This is the part where the event stopped being a cheerful fundraiser and started becoming a citywide group project titled, "Who Approved the Floating Trash Parade?" And the answer was not comforting. Because once released, the balloons could not be recalled. There was no giant undo button, no balloon shepherd, no municipal vacuum cleaner hovering over Ohio. The balloons were now independent citizens. They had formed a government, and their first law was inconvenience. By the time people realized the weather had turned the stunt sideways, it was too late. The record had been broken, the balloons were loose, and Cleveland had accidentally invented confetti with consequences. Then came the chaos montage. Drivers were distracted or forced to deal with balloons landing on roads. Reports connected the fallout with traffic problems and accidents. Burke Lakefront Airport had to deal with balloons on or near its runway area, with accounts noting a temporary runway closure. Lake Erie became a floating ball pit. Except instead of happy children, it had boaters, wildlife, rescue crews, and the growing realization that maybe releasing over 1 million objects into the air was not mankind's sharpest pencil. Balloons washed into waterways and onto beaches. Some reportedly turned up across Lake Erie on the Canadian side. Nothing says international relations like mailing Ontario a damp clown cloud. There were also reports of balloons spooking horses, which led to one of the lawsuits after an owner alleged her Arabian horses were injured. So now the balloon release had annoyed drivers, airport staff, boaters, environmentalists, Canadians, and horses. That is not a public relations win. That is a side quest where every NPC is mad at you. And the worst part is that all of this started from a feel-good charity stunt. Nobody woke up that morning thinking, "Today I shall challenge the Great Lakes ecosystem with party decorations." But bad planning has a way of turning good intentions into a courtroom PowerPoint. And then the story gets serious. 2 boaters, Raymond Broderick and Bernard Sulzer, had gone missing on Lake Erie around the time of the event. The Coast Guard was involved in the search. After the balloon release, many balloons came down over the lake. Reports from the time and later summaries say the balloons complicated the search because floating balloons on the water made it harder to spot people or debris. Their boat was found, and the men were later found dead. This part should be handled carefully. Balloonfest is often retold online as, "The balloons killed 2 people." That is too simple and may be misleading. Later reporting has debated how directly the event affected the outcome, and a Coast Guard search and rescue official quoted in later coverage said the balloon release did not cause the deaths. What can be said responsibly is this: the balloon release happened during an active missing boaters search. Balloons on Lake Erie complicated visibility and search conditions. The men were later found dead, and the event became part of the public discussion and legal aftermath. So the joke pauses here. Because even when the original stunt was silly, the consequences were not all silly. This is where Balloonfest stops being just, "Haha, Cleveland made a whoopsie cloud," and becomes a real example of how spectacle can collide with public safety. Then, after the balloons fell, came the paperwork. The aftermath was ugly. The wife of one of the missing boaters sued United Way of Cleveland and the balloon company involved in organizing the release. That case later settled on undisclosed terms. The horse owner also sued, and that case was reportedly settled as well. The event also had cost overruns, meaning the charity stunt that was supposed to raise money reportedly ended up losing money. That is a special category of failure. You tried to raise funds, you broke a world record, you got sued, and somehow the balloons still sent an invoice. Over time, Balloonfest '86 went from a civic pride moment to a case study in terrible planning. It is now remembered less as Cleveland's colorful comeback and more as that time a city released 1 million balloons and immediately learned about wind. To be fair, people in 1986 were not thinking about balloon releases the way many people do now. Environmental awareness around mass balloon releases has changed a lot. Guinness no longer tracks mass balloon release records. But that is exactly why the story sticks. It feels like a time capsule from an era when someone could say, "Let's put 1.5 million balloons in the sky." And the room responded, "Great, but can we make it 2 million?" So Cleveland did technically break a record. Unfortunately, the record was followed by traffic problems, lawsuits, pollution, airport disruption, and one of the most powerful "who approved this" moments in American city history. And that is the lesson of Balloonfest '86. Sometimes a good cause, a big crowd, and a beautiful visual are still not enough to defeat the ancient enemy of mankind. Basic follow-up questions. Where will it land? What if it rains? What if the lake becomes soup? What if the horses unionize? Balloonfest was supposed to make Cleveland look bright, bold, and full of hope. And for a few minutes, it did. Then gravity clocked in. So yes, Cleveland broke the record, but the sky kept the receipt. Like, subscribe, and stay baffled, because history keeps finding new ways to be ridiculous.